Oh, I have to hit this button. Do you get that button that says it's being recorded? Maybe it's
No,
just me because you bring me into it.
because I'm the host. So
Oh, look at you. You're the host. Aren't you famous? Aren't you big time? Mary's a big time. Oh, you know what? I'm not even signed on yet here.
anyway, like I was saying,
As I was saying.
it's Alex Kittner's death day today, which is kind of morbid, but
Oh yeah,
so yeah, so that's why I have the Jaws shirt on. That the Quint's SS Orca.
yeah. Well, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, the SS Orca. People get all freaked out about that. About Jaws.
What what do you mean? Like
Oh,
just
it's
because?
a big deal here. You know how it is.
Oh yeah.
We were on the island last year, so that
Yeah,
was we got to go back over there.
I know. I'm saying good morning, everyone, even though there's like nobody here. So
Do you remember that very first time we did this? You're like, if anyone's on, say hello. There's
yeah,
no one
and no
on.
one on. No one was on.
That was actually hilarious. One of your better moments in life, right
Mm.
there. Turn this thing down here. All right. Okay, I think I'm good. So now it's just us hanging out. So this is cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I know sometimes people will watch us after the fact, but yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
people watch afterwards.
we'll see how the weather goes today. So we have to get to the baseball field
Yeah.
probably like 4:30. We got stuff we're gonna do this
Morning,
afternoon.
Autumn.
Oh, hello,
And Frank.
hello.
James from England. Nice.
Old England. Oh, very cool, very cool. Battle of Savage Station. Yeah, Frank's always good with the anniversaries.
I know he always has an anniversary when he comes on here, which is
Nice.
awesome. I love that because it's like if we haven't done an episode, then when he pops on, it's like that gives us something to talk about.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of stuff going on now because you've got the Gettysburg campaign in full
Yep.
swing. You've got Vicksburg, which is kind of culminating. You've got everything going on. Obviously, what we talked about with everything going on in the 1862.
Yeah. You also have Atlanta
With
campaign.
because this is the 7 days primarily is what's going on here. No, it's really really good. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. It's a lot of cool stuff going on. So that'll be a good time.
Well, Barbara said she didn't think there was a show today. We didn't know we posted it kind of last minute on Facebook. And I might have screwed. I hope I didn't screw up the date of it. No, I need to check that.
Well, you probably do. Well, if it's just us hanging out, if it's just a few people,
Yeah,
our
no, there's people popping on.
just be the hardcores hanging out today, man. This could be a
The hardcores,
private little situation here.
the hardcores.
Um, I love the fact how you screw up and you just blow it off. And if it was me, it'd be oh my god, might as well
I wouldn't
kidnap a
care. Like
freaking
it's
Lindbergh baby if I did
technology.
it.
I mean, the thing is like I've worked with people like that really make a big deal like in the past, like out of stuff that it's like, okay, but I had this one supervisor at the library, or she was like a director or something. And anyway,
Mm-hmm.
one of my colleagues was like flipping out because she'd forgotten to put something into a bin. It was for like a patron or whatever. And my supervisor was just like, okay, they're books. Did anybody die? No, we're good. Calm down. And that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
been my philosophy ever since it's a library. Like,
Oh, really?
yeah. Oh, okay, I posted it correctly. So Frank, let's see what's going on.
Oh,
Good morning, Scott.
so you did promote it correctly.
Morning. Good
I
morning,
gave you
Bill. Oh, Frank is wondering because this is the big news, and I know like we do talk all about the Civil War, but Gettysburg comes up quite a bit. But
Gettysburg. Never heard of
Frank,
it.
anybody been to Little Round Top yet? How is the new Buster statue looking? Well, Jen Tilly might be able to fill you in on that.
I mean, everyone who's been a real round top loves it. I mean, the
Yeah,
paths are great.
it looks
Um,
really
the
good.
the DQ up there is really a surprise. No one expected to see that. It was really pretty good. No, I mean, we're going to be up there this weekend, so we're going to see it firsthand. So, by all accounts, it looks really really good. The pictures are great.
Yeah,
The news was broken by the Dobbin House of all
which was
people,
I
Mary.
thought was pretty. I think I wonder if that was kind of like planned or whatever, but like
I don't think it was planned.
it looks it
I
does
think they
look
scooped the
really
Park
good.
Service. That's pretty
Mhm.
funny. No, I think it's great. It does look really really good. You and I kind of joked about it. It would have been hilarious if they opened it up the day after the anniversary when everybody
See, if
left.
I ran the place, I'd be like, you know what, we're opening on the fourth,
Yeah,
just to
that's gonna guess that's probably why you're not running the place.
yeah,
No, but it's good. It's good though. I think it's pretty good. A lot of people get up there and check it out. Big weekend. Gettysburg 161 this weekend.
yeah,
Obviously, Vicksburg 161 also coming up next weekend as well. July 4th
yeah,
is already here. Holy boy! I always consider July 4th to be like the halfway point of the summer. That's
yeah,
because of our baseball world. That's
yeah.
just how it is. But in any case, so
Yeah,
we can.
James Chamberlain rocks. I have to say, like, I mean, So my favorite spots on the battlefield are East Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill. I really like to study the fighting that happened at Culp's. I really like East Cemetery Hill for obvious reasons because Howard was there and I find it really fascinating. But Little Round Top, I mean, I know Chamberlain does get a lot of attention, but I saw some comments this week on, where it was like kind of almost like slamming him a little bit. And it's like, okay, yes, he gets a lot of attention but he's still like his part of the battle is still really important, but don't forget, but at the same time, don't forget like David Ireland and the 137th New York over on Culp's Hill and Paps Green
Well,
and all that
it
too.
doesn't have to be one over the other,
Yeah,
and
it's not a
that's
contest.
and that's the thing. And I guess before we get into games, we'll talk about Gettysburg with this. But I mean, the thing about it is people get so competitive with this. And look, I realize a lot of it is because of the movie, and I
Yeah.
get that. And I think when you look at a pure military strategy situation, yes, David Ireland Culp's Hill is much more important. It just
Yeah.
is because if Maryland Stewart is able to take that position, the Union position is probably untenable. Meade probably has to pull back, but it doesn't mean what Chamberlain did was unimportant. Joshua Chamberlain's holding Little Round Top was a must-have at that moment, with limited men,
Yeah.
no ammo, and did he embellish the chart? Of course he did, but you know something, that doesn't mean it less important.
Yeah.
So when you go to Little Round Top and you go down to that 20th Main Monument, you're standing on one of the more important places in military history.
Yeah.
But again, I think because the movie, it gives the impression that it's the only
That it's
thing that
the
happened,
only thing. Yeah.
and that's not a slight of Colville or a slight of any of these guys who helped push back Ambrose Wright, Julian Weir's artillery, the 19th Maine. It doesn't mean anything like that. 137th New York, 149th New York. It does, but it just they have to focus. The movie and the book have to focus on one aspect. You can't focus on all of them.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great visit. But I think people get kind of hold down on this thing too. Like we said before, to the point where if you promote Chamberlain, somehow it's a slight on Dave Ireland and vice
And vice
versa.
versa.
And,
And
and
it's
it
not.
doesn't and it doesn't have to be. But I think at the end of the day, Culps doesn't get the love it deserves. And I
That's
think
what James just said.
that's the big picture of it, because I think people don't realize the importance of it. And I think the other thing you can remember too, a little round top. It's a beautiful vista.
It is. It's gorgeous.
You don't have to be a Civil War buff or nerd or loser or whatever you want to call us to appreciate. You can bring up a complete Civil War Cowan and look out at the field, and they'll go, wow, this is awesome. And you'll
Mhm.
fall in love with the sunset and the whole deal. Yeah, I mean, I've been up there many times and people ask me if that's a statue of Joshua Chamberlain. Of course.
Yeah.
But I mean, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. But again, hey, at least people are going. I mean,
Yeah, and that's the thing. And
you're starting to see,
people are gonna like who they like too.
you know, but but people, the thing about it is as you're starting to see these battlefields slowly disappearing. Camp Letterman is gone. I mean,
Yeah.
we were there last Christmas. We got to walk the field. We did a live from there, and now they're building a supermarket in there, an Aldi. And again, so it wasn't battlefield ground, so ABT couldn't take it,
Yeah.
but it's gone. And if you don't visit the battlefields, you don't appreciate the battlefields. They're all going to be gone.
Yeah. And you have to
And
make them for like, the thing is like I was telling you this morning, like I've, well, my whole life I've kind of like been come and go with like bird watching, but I've recently really got into it, especially with the Merlin app and all that. But when we were at Manassas a couple years ago, like there was a guy and he had like binoculars. I'm like, the heck. And then I realized he was bird watching and I looked over to where he was looking and I saw this bluebird. I'd never seen one before.
was it on your
And
shoulder, like the
yeah,
song?
yeah.
Bluebird on
On
my
my
shoulder.
shoulder. I know. But anyway, I think it's awesome that people can go and use these places. There's those of us that love to learn about the history, but then there's also the nature aspect of it too. You can go hiking, you can go bird watching. It's like they're multi-use areas, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. And I know there's some people that do that they just want it to be all about the battlefields and all
Now
that.
you
And I
can go you can go to Culps and you can sit at in they've done a great job thinning out the trees. And unfortunately they're all going to grow back, obviously. But you can sit there and you can look down at Forbes Rock and you can see the breastworks. And like we
yeah,
said before, they're real and they're spectacular, right? and you can see where Maryland Stewart's men came up, and you can walk all the way around, and you get a real good flavor of the plight of Greene's guys, and see exactly what that one brigade they were able to hold off all those men. But you don't get the vista, and that's the thing. And what people have to realize about these battlefields, not just Gettysburg, but Antietam, Chickamauga, Battle of
Yeah.
Shrewd Farms, pick one. It doesn't really matter. People like to go for different reasons. People like to go because it's pretty. People like to see the
Mhm.
birds. People like to see the animals. People like to see the mountains and the sunset. So
Yep.
it's a little bit for everybody. And so that's people got to keep that in mind when you're starting to talk about wildlife on these battlefields. It's a bigger picture beyond that. But again, if you go and you go to check out um, if you go to check out some of these sites, now Gettysburg specifically, there are substantially many sites you can visit at Gettysburg that are just as important as Little Round Top that you can
Yep.
walk. The problem with Gettysburg is that you're limited to where you can go because of the foliage and the
Yeah.
ticks and the snakes and the Rosewoods clown and the whole friggin' deal that's out there. But if you go, the best time to go to a battlefield, they always say go where the battle's going on. You can feel the weather of the soldiers, the plight of the men. But if you really want to go and walk it, you go in like November, December, because
Yeah,
you
and
can
that's
actually
what
get,
Frank said.
you know,
That's when he's going again, and I said that's a great time of year to go. Um, Ghost of Howard's Right Arm says Culps is quiet. It gives you a break from the crowd and some shade to enjoy, which I
you
like.
can you can walk the footsteps of the Second Mass, Charles Mudge's guys, and those Indian boys and those
Yeah,
Indiana Knights, right? And you can walk right across that field, heading towards that lower Culps Hill, and you can take out the road, take out the monuments. You can imagine the carnage of that
mm,
walk. But again, if you go there and you go to the Second Mass Monument, no one's going to be there because if anybody
yeah,
goes to Culps, they're going to go to the tower. But there are places you can go. You can walk Pardee Field. You can
mhm,
go to the area of the second Maryland. You can walk down a little vista where the soldiers were buried back there. There's a lot of cool places you can go. But again, I think people don't realize the impact of Killer Angels, the impact of Gettysburg, because so many people go and they go to the spots. They go to the
yeah,
angle. They want to see where old Winnie Boy got his junk shot, right? You want to go to Little Round Top.
yeah,
You want to go to see where Buford held off. And it's great that they can do that. But what's great about the big battlefields, and this isn't just Gettysburg, you can go to the places if you study them and you can see where like the real stuff went down, the real stuff. You go to
yeah.
South Cavalry Field, you go see where Elon Farnsworth was wounded. You go to the Fifth New York Monument up there in the hill, which nobody goes.
Lost Lane, no, but like I mean, Lost Lane is interesting. I loved East Cavalry Field when you, Gentili, and I went out there. When was that? In September, and we did that
Yeah,
tour with you in the
you can.
rain.
Maxwell and I took a walk. I don't know why you didn't go, but he and I went, and we took a walk through Bushman Hill, and no one goes to Bushman Hill, and you can walk down that area, and you can come across a perfect stone wall that Kilpatrick's cavalry hid behind before they went to attack the Texans and the Alabamans and those people in that field. And it's right before that dinosaur bridge, but you can't see it because it's the other way. If you have to turn your
Yeah,
head, but we walked that thing, and I said to him, I go, David, we're not going to see one human on this walk. Just so you know, it's just
mhm,
going to be us. Um, and so it was great because there's a lot of places you can go. You can walk down to 20th Indiana. You can walk down that area, and you can see where, where the Third Arkansas came against John Wheeler and see that whole thing. My boy Edward Cross, you can see
mhm.
that whole area where the Fifth New Hampshire is. But there's a lot of places to see, and people get it. But
Well, it's
it
like
is
any
what it
big
is.
battlefields, like Chickamauga. There's so much to see there. Barbara has a question that you'll like. What kind of snakes are up there at Gettysburg?
Oh, there's freaking rattlesnakes at Gettysburg. There's copperheads at Gettysburg. It's just you got to be careful. And the problem with that is the rocks. Now, if you go, Little Round Top doesn't have as many because there's a lot of people up there now. But my fear is you're going to people haven't been up there in a while, so they might have got
Yeah,
back up there. So be
you'll be like,
careful.
you'll go up there. Hello, Darren.
You know what? That'll be it. You want to hear a rebel yell. Watch me see a snake. But there's a place called Devil's Kitchen, which is right in front of Big Round Top. And if you go down there, no one goes there. It's kind of off the beaten path, but it's a cool little rock monument. That's where a lot of the snakes are. And if you're going towards Little Round Top now, because you can go back up there and you're going up the road and you take the left towards Round Top, if you take the right and you're heading
Yeah.
towards the Tawnytown Road, that woods out there, there's a lot of snakes out there. So you got to be careful. You got to be very, very careful with that.
Yeah.
But I don't need to see a goddamn snake. I'll tell you that right
We do have so James mentions, and this gets to our episode, the preservation of Gaines Mill and Cold Harbor.
Well, that's a great question. So, Gaines Mill is pretty pristine when you're talking the area of Turkey Hill, right? We were there about a year or so ago. We went down to
Yeah.
Gaines. Cold Harbor, which it's kind of like wilderness in Chancellorsville. There are points it overlaps, right? But Gaines Mill is disappointing because a lot of it's gone. It's a housing development now. You can still, when you pull in, there's a little visitor center, there's a little building,
Yeah.
and you can walk the breastwork line, which is really, really cool, but it's just breastworks. But there's not much there. If you go about a mile away and you go to Gaines Mill, and you can go see William Gaines's the grist mill. You can see the field where a lot of the guys were Longstreet's guys and Pickett's guys crossed,
Yeah.
which was kind of like a precursor to Pickett's charge. But you can go up there and you can walk that ground and you can walk that Union line right down the ravine towards Bosun Swamp, and that's pristine. And so
Yeah.
I think a lot of people will go to Cold Harbor because of Cold Harbor, but they miss out on Gaines Mill. If you're going to go in that area, go to Gaines Mill because for the most part, it's not as big as it used to be. But the area they preserve, which is a pretty good
Yeah.
size, is pristine. And so definitely
Yeah.
go to Gaines. Gaines is fantastic, no
Yeah,
question.
because we stopped at Cold Harbor first, didn't really know what to expect when we got there. We were like, wow, this is it. And then we went down to Gaines and it was like there was much more there to see, which was like, if you're in the area, like go see it. It's still worth, say you've been to Cold Harbor. But yeah,
Well,
Gaines.
well, you can go to Gaines and you can walk the Fifth Corps line. You can walk Porter's line for the most
Yeah.
part, and you can see a lot of what happened there, and that's really really cool.
Yeah.
You can basically just go ahead and you can see exactly where most of the guys were. You can walk Morell's line.
Yeah.
You go on the left hand side. You go to the right. You can go to Sykes's line, and you can basically fall back and see exactly how it was. And you can imagine what it must have been like seeing those Union soldiers come running up that hill from the swamp, being chased by that onslaught of us 35,000 Confederates by Lee, who went all in that big July 4th
Yeah.
finale. Boom, 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 coming up that hill to attack them. And the Chickahominy is about 2 miles from there. You can kind of see that if you really want to see, if you want to see a river. But definitely go to Gaines Mill. It's not far from Richmond. It's a really
Yeah.
really cool place to go, and I think people enjoy it.
Yeah, no, it's a really cool area to see. Like, and that just, that whole area is morning, MJ. It gets into this like, you know, again, like Battle of Seven Pines, which was fought about, you know, almost a month before Gaines Mill. And that's where
Mm-hmm.
you have like the change of power from Joseph E. Johnston to Lee. But it's like a runway now for an airport. So can't you can't go to it.
No, the thing about that Richmond area is you can go to the peninsula and you can see a lot of stuff. One of my interns in my other life is from Yorktown, and she's never been any of the Civil War stuff in the area. So she got
Really?
an F she got an F for the day yesterday for
Which
that.
intern?
It was Hannah from the baseball
Oh,
team, but that's how it is though.
kids
People
today
don't
don't
visit.
appreciate. I don't know.
No,
No, they do.
no,
They do. But
they don't.
that I don't falter for that because when you live in an area, you tend not to go to the history for some reason. I mean, like I went to a couple 1812 forts growing up, um, but not a whole lot. And like my area is like, obviously that area of the south of Ontario is big 1812 area. Didn't go to a lot there. But you look at people who live in Gettysburg and they haven't been to a lot of the places. You look at us here, we live in Plymouth and we've never been to the museum, you
Well,
know.
I mean, the thing about it though is, and that's the same for everybody. I grew up in the shadow of Lexington Battleground. I
Mm,
went there a couple of times. No one really cares, but no, that's the truth of it. But again, you visit these places, but Gaines Mill for the most part is pretty pristine. And we went there for Lisa Samia's presentation. We went down to Richmond a year or so ago, and we got to see a lot of different things. But you can spend forever doing the peninsula, or especially the 7 days. You go to James
yeah.
River, you can go see Malvern Hill, you can go see everything. Yorktown, you go see Jamestown, you can see all that stuff. But again, it's one of those things where not everybody goes.
No, no. And I mean, it's kind of like in Gettysburg when people just stay in Gettysburg and they don't realize, Monocacy is like half an hour away. And, you can get to all these Harper's Ferry is not that, you know, far away and all that.
No, but
There's
there's a lot of things, and if you go down to certain parts of Maryland, Virginia, places like that, you're lucky because if you're into this thing, you can see all kinds of different things that people don't really that people I think don't really appreciate in real time. But again, that's what history is, though. That you want to create that spark, that thirst for knowledge. So if you're driving down, you're 15 going through Maryland, you see a
yeah,
Civil War trail sign. Oh, that's where Lee got his, that's where he got his
pull
orders.
over
Well,
and take a
you know,
selfie.
you're gonna, yeah, you pull over and you can take a picture and you go check that stuff out. Because you know what though, if you don't do it, um, no one's going to do it, and there's no reason to keep that going if you think about it.
Yeah, Ambrose asked, do you think that a dedicated Bleeding Kansas Border War Museum would be a profitable museum? There isn't one dedicated, just a bunch of small museums that talk about it. I mean,
I don't see why any
sometimes what
museum would be a
happens
bad
is those
idea.
smaller museums will amalgamate into a bigger one. But I mean, the thing like, I guess, yeah, profitable with, as he put it, with quotes around it, because museums tend not to make a lot of money, and you have to look like, is this something that people want to learn about? And this is where you have to make it relevant for people, allow them to be able to relate back to it, you
Mhm.
know? So that's why when you're, giving a tour, no matter where you are, you have to relate to your audience. And when it comes to museums, some people don't just want to look at like an artifact. They want to have like a story told. So you have to like
Well, you can go to New
tell
Mexico.
it in a way,
You can see the Lincoln County War Museum. A lot
Yeah.
of these places embrace the history, but again, there's a saturation point. I mean, you're talking about a place like say like Virginia, for example, where there's history on literally every single exit. You're not
Hmm.
going to have a museum for everything. You have to
No.
pick and choose. Like you have the Museum of the Shenandoah, right? Which
Yeah.
covers that whole Winchester area. Everything that happened in that area, it's one big museum right downtown Old Town Winchester, which covers the whole thing. You're not going to have a museum at Star Fort and Third Winchester and Second Winchester and all that, because what are you going to do?
Yeah.
But take advantage of the ones you can go to.
Yeah. And I have to
You
say,
know,
one of the best ones I've ever been to is Pickett's Mill, that little museum with the
that
one
was a good
room.
one.
But they told it so well. And honestly, there was more about Howard written at that museum than there is at the Visitor Center in Gettysburg. Like Howard is basically, for whatever reason, he's non-existent at that. Like the 11th Corps doesn't really get a mention at the
Yeah.
Visitor Center, which I've always found a little, I mean, I guess I'm a little biased, but I'm always like, well, they played a big role on the first day.
No,
you know,
but again, it's one of those things where I mean, and it's funny when you go to some of these museums. I mean, I went to one in Myrtle Beach one time. It was a Civil War museum, but let's just say the only music they played was a two types country and western.
oh
I
yeah,
mean, it was a little
Bonnie Blue
biased toward,
Flag and Dixie.
yeah, it was a little biased. But again, but that's the way it is when you come in there and they ask about if you're interested in learning about the War of Northern Aggression, okay,
Yeah,
fine. But that's how it is. And so but at least there exists though. At least you can see the stuff. I mean,
yeah,
there's
yeah.
a
The at least the history is there, and I mean, like, there are, you have the National Civil War Museum in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which is really good. You have the Civil War Museum in Richmond, which was at one time was the Museum of the Confederacy, another really great museum
you
to go and see different artifacts. There's, even we were talking this morning about the Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain House. That is a really like
know,
good Civil War in a different way museum because it's more so after the war. And you
yeah.
get to go into like his little Civil War room that he had, which is really cool. And it's the tour there is so well. I mean, we had a really good tour guide though. That guy was awesome.
No, I've been in that museum a handful of times, and when you go, it's usually really, really good. And anybody who hasn't been up to Brunswick, Maine, on the campus of Bowdoin, to go see his house and museum, it's really one of the
Yeah.
absolute best museums. And it's not just the Civil War; it's his time as governor too, and time as president of Bowdoin. But people, we have a little fun with Chamberlain here from time to time, but he's a pretty impactful guy as
Mhm.
far as in the state of Maine what he did, and so that museum kind of celebrates his whole life. It is always kind of humorous to me that he made his wife call him governor, which is
Don't
what
get any ideas.
Oh, a governor someday. You kidding me? Be king, you know. But it's pretty. It's so great. You tell the stories, and the one that comes to mind is the one about his chair, right?
Yeah.
He has this big governor chair, which kind of looks like this big, huge, is a big blue puffy type of chair he had in his office when he was
Yeah.
governor. And when they moved, it vanished, and they couldn't find it. Just disappeared. And it turns out that it was at the University of Maine
Yeah.
for like 50 years, and they used it for their homecoming queen parade, where she sat in the chair and waved, and they didn't realize what the chair
Mm.
was until someone said, "Hey, I think that's Chamberlain's governor chair."
Yeah.
And then now that they've discovered it was, and his chair is now in the museum. But for years, the homecoming queen from Maine in Orono used to ride down the main drag with sitting on that chair. They had no idea what the chair was. They just thought it was a big theater chair, which is kind
Yeah.
of funny. That
Well, it's
which
very ornate and dramatic looking chair, which you would expect Chamberlain, if you know anything about him,
but
would sit in.
But the scary thing is that how much history is lost. We talk about that table he used to have,
Yeah, where
where
all the names were carved into it.
Oliver Otis Howard, William Sherman, John Brown Gordon, Chamberlain, they all they assigned their name with a penknife onto his kitchen table, and it disappeared, and it's lost to history. It's sitting in someone's garage somewhere.
Yeah.
A table in wood carved with. Could you imagine if that showed up?
Oh my God. Could you imagine like someone's just like, I found this in my grandfather's
Oh,
garage when I was cleaning
I'd
it
get that.
out.
I'd buy that for like $5 at the yard sale. Tickets to Gettysburg, put it in the house. Imagine that.
Oh my God. Yeah,
I'd
that,
charge money, charge Yingling to come see it.
James says still need a Tilda museum.
Yeah, well, I would agree. You can go up to Castine, Maine, and you're not going to see too much Charles Tilden. But the problem with that is like so many of the guys, and I don't know if they just didn't appreciate their experiences in real time.
I think it was
Um,
a want to get back
they just
to
he never
life
wrote
and
about it.
forget about what happened, you know.
He went back and he just became worked in a merchant and just lived the rest of his days and never really promoted himself. Again, we're still trying to get him a Medal of Honor, and that's still ongoing with the
Yep.
state of Maine and the federal government. That'll take 50 years, but that'll get done though eventually. Who knows? But again, a lot of these guys just never. I think we look on them now with kind of an awe of what they did. But back then, he's like, yeah, that's what I did, but that's what I had. That was my job.
Yeah.
I came home, and that was the end of it. So if you go up to Castine, which is out by Maine Maritime, if you're ever way there, that's by Santa's Workshop. That's way
Yeah.
the hell up there. You're not going to find a lot of stuff for Christine, like you do for Chamberlain or stuff you see. You
No.
see a lot of stuff. When we were in Vermont a couple weeks ago, it was pretty subtle. You saw some William Wells stuff. There's
Yeah.
a statue of Wells, the same statue that's in Gettysburg, right not far from Big Round Top. He has and is basically right along the riverfront. The hero of Burlington is William Wells. It's not Oliver S. Howard because
Oh
we
no
moved there
shit.
after the
I know
war.
he just
You
moved
know,
there, but I don't think he saw himself as like Howard didn't see himself that way. I mean, Burlington was where he lived because his kid was an engineer there.
Mhm.
And he built a lot, his kid built a lot of the buildings that are still downtown. You can go see the church, but it's very much, I don't know, I wasn't surprised that it was not in your face because I think that's kind of how he was, but to read the stories of how we're pretty sure we found the route that he walked to work every day.
Oh, there's no question.
And
We
that
absolutely
was the
did.
route that he was walking the day he died. And someone pulled over, it was likely, a car and said like, hey, do you want a ride? And for the first time ever, Howard accepted a ride because he wasn't feeling well. And he died a few hours later of a stroke or heart
So the
attack.
so the house he died in, we went to go visit. We
Is
went
now
to
a
go see
frat
his house.
house,
It's a fraternity house for UVM, and we
which
got
is great.
and graduation was happening the next day. We were there on like a Saturday, and University of Vermont was graduating on Sunday, and you could see them setting up the kegs and all the
Yeah.
and you could look up in the window and you could see where Howard's
Howard's.
bedroom was where he died. And you always wonder if anybody realized that that's the room. But yeah, it's just basically like a fraternity house for University, which is actually hilarious if you think
I
about
kind
it.
of found it funny. I found it very much, it's like, well, it's still around.
Can you imagine his ghost stumbling through there, the stuff that he's seen in that house?
Oh God.
I mean, and he's the Christian general, right? And God knows the stuff he's seen, probably in his own very room, probably. But what was sad that we went, because being the losers we are, they used to have his original doorknob on
Yeah.
the door where he touched and turned, he walked in and he died. and they changed the doorknob. It's a
Yeah.
modern day doorknob, which broke our hearts because that just happened. Because that like a year or
Yeah.
two ago, the original doorknob was still there. Now it's
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
But these are the
But it
stupid
was,
things you do and to go find these
but
things,
that's
you
what I
know?
want, and I wanted to like saw where he was buried and like his granddaughters, the last one passed away, I think in 2011. Like
Yeah.
that's not that long ago. When like, I mean,
And she's
eh,
the one who went with Dan
with
Skelly
yeah, with the
to
twin.
help her twin to go see the monument for Oliver Otis Howard, East Cemetery Hill. She was there for the placement of that.
Yeah.
Uh, and again, you think about someone who dies in 2011 was hanging out with Dan Skelly,
Yeah.
right?
Who was hanging
Um,
out with Howard at the Battle of Gettysburg.
right. And again, you tell people all the time, the war's not that long ago, people. It's not that long ago. It really
Yeah.
isn't.
Yeah.
But that's what's cool about going to visit some of these really kind of obscure type of sites. And unfortunately, you have to be a real niche type of person to be able to find the stuff because a lot of the stuff is not going to be. There's no sign that says, "Hey, here's where Howard walked. Here's where so and so."
You have to figure it out from what and like when
Right.
we were in Leeds, Maine, his hometown, we were driving around trying to find his house because he's very descriptive as to where it was located and we couldn't find the house. So we suspect it was probably knocked down, but there's nothing in Leeds about him. I
No.
know the Maine Historical Society has his jacket from West Point, but and out at Lincoln Memorial University, which Howard was one of the founders of that university, which is in Harrogate, Tennessee, they have a museum and an archive. They have some of his papers there, but they also have his they've got some of his military stuff as well. But what I suspect is that the family that I'm guessing they're still in Burlington, they have a lot of his stuff and it's just not been donated. They're hanging on to it.
Well, he's their family. I mean, a lot of the
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, the problem is like you have you have some really cool stuff, and you think the family would at least put it on consignment, say so people could say, well, they can see his sword, they can see whatever the hell they want to see. I
But
think
he's
the
buried with
only
the sword, right? Likely.
I'm sure he is, but I mean, I think the only thing that I've ever seen that's been made public is his West Point jacket
Yeah.
and up at Maine Historical Society. But for the
There's
most part,
his epaulets, are they? They're up there in Tennessee. And there's some
yeah,
other stuff too of his that is in Tennessee. And then
I'm pretty
Bowden has
sure his Nikes are in Tennessee.
probably that whole thing.
No,
But yeah, the family, I'm pretty sure there's still family in Burlington. Because that
oh,
plot,
they're
it's
absolutely there
clear there's
absolutely
like
are.
room for more graves and stuff. And like MJ says, like you just said, the Civil War is not that far from us. Like
No,
that's
it
not
isn't.
very
No, and that's the thing too is people tend. I think what got me into the Civil War. A lot of it was the pictures, was seeing the stuff
yeah.
and seeing the pictures of not just Lincoln, but seeing the dead at Gettysburg and seeing the entrenchments at Petersburg and seeing all that stuff because it brings it home to you. It does.
Well, and I think
I
it's
mean,
sometimes it's not necessarily also about being on a battlefield because they stood there, but it's also about being in a town where they were and knowing, being able to find the route where they walked.
I mean,
And in
I'll
some
tell you,
ways seeing what they see or
you go
what they saw.
you go to parts of this country out that you'll notice pretty quickly the attitudes of the Civil War are still there.
Yeah.
You go to parts of Carolina, you go parts of Georgia, places like that, and you'll first if you go down Georgia, for example, or places like that, you're from the north, the first thing they're going to say is Yankee, first thing,
Yeah.
and so that's part of the culture, that's part of the deal, and like we said before, Lincoln gets killed in Reconstruction is a complete mess because of Andrew Johnson. It's like that broken bone that never got to heal right.
Yeah.
That's always a nag. It's always there. It always hurts. That's what the ghost of the Civil War is.
Yeah.
It's not just the soldiers and the generals, but it's the attitudes, it's the politics, and politics was the whole thing from day one with it. And so you have to understand that. And knowing the people and knowing the personalities of some of these folks, it gives you a better idea of those politics.
Yeah.
When we talk about guys like John Brown Gordon, right? You talk about guys, even the northern guys like Hancock, for example, right? Guys like Reynolds, guys like Grant, Sherman. These are the attitudes these people had. So
yeah. James said wearing a 28-3 shirt in Atlanta, who'd do that?
Yeah, I did that. That was a great moment. That was that day when our friend Bill and I went to the Super Bowl in Atlanta a few years ago, and we went to the NFL experience, and I had a Patriots hoodie on, but I had a 28-3 T-shirt on, and we got to stand in line to take a picture with the Atlanta Falcons cheerleaders who were there because they were hosting it. And right before there was a big line, and once I got up there, I took the sweatshirt off,
Yeah.
and the whole crowd went berserk on the t-shirt. And I took the picture with the cheerleaders, and then one of them was all pissy, and the other one thought it was hilarious. But yeah, I did it. I also wore a
I
Sherman shirt earlier too. That's not, I'm that guy.
I wore a Sherman shirt in actually, well, in Ringgold Gap of all places.
I mean,
And
I also wore a Yankee suck shirt to Yankee Stadium.
yeah.
I don't care. It's a shit. I mean, people will say one thing and then you tell them to go f themselves and they shut right up. It's just it's a funny world sometimes.
And I was
but for
with
the
a friend, it was with a friend of mine, and they were on the trip to go hiking because I was like, well, there's a lot of hiking at Chickamauga, right? But
yeah,
they knew enough of the history that when like I had a hoodie on because it's kind of cool, but we got to this like winery, and of course I'm like had the Sherman shirt on under the hoodie, and they were like, could you like, are you serious? We're in Georgia. And I'm like, yep. Nobody said anything. One of the bartenders kind of was like shaking their head at me, but I'm like, it was kind of funny. Now I did walk into the Chickamauga Visitor Center with that shirt on, my second trip to Chickamauga. And the guy working at the table was like not having any of it. Like just the stuff he said to me, I'm like, should you be saying that as like a volunteer here?
well, I mean, people have to have
Like
fun with
calling
it.
Sherman a murderer? It was like, I'm backing away from this conversation. I'm not having this conversation.
Yeah, well, I mean that like I said before, a lot of that's the
Yeah,
attitudes, the
that was, I was
sell.
like, wow,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was, it wasn't, I shouldn't say I wasn't surprised by it. Um, but like, I was like, and I knew one of the park rangers who was working in the bookstore, and he was just like shaking his head about it at the guy, like when the guy said that, I'm like, oh God.
Oh, I know. I mean, I went to, you know, I used to live in Texas when I
Yeah.
was out of high school, and I remember hearing some of the attitudes they talked about, and that's the reality of it.
Yeah, David Maxwell mentions Ellsworth was in the Logan County Courthouse in 1860 stumping for Lincoln. It now resides at Greenfield Village, 10 minutes from my house. And that's also where the Henry Ford Museum is too. And that's where the Lincoln assassination chair is. It's
Yeah,
not at Ford's Theater.
yeah.
Let me tell you, Henry Ford Museum is not giving that chair up anytime soon. They are like, this is ours now.
Oh, I know.
Like,
Yeah,
I meant to like in the episode we just did, St. George Cook, he's buried near Detroit, I think, because he died in Detroit.
yeah. He's buried in Michigan,
Because I meant to ask, I wanted to ask David if he'd ever been to his grave before.
yeah. I mean, he's again, he's somebody who a very, very, very niche type of, um, very niche type of guy. Because again, Gaines Mill ended his career. He
Yeah.
had he had that ill-fated charge of the Fifth U.S. Cavalry, and he got pantsed, and he lost all the guns. And he was also, and I mean, if you realize, he probably made that charge because he was embarrassed that his son-in-law did his march around McClellan, and so I think he did that
Yeah.
again. It's all about redemption with a lot of these things.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and I,
though
and
for
I,
just real quick, St. George Cook is Jeb
Jeb
Stuart's
Stewart's father-in-law.
father-in-law. And he was born in, is it Leesburg,
He was born in
Virginia?
Leesburg, which
His
people, what's so funny? People think Leesburg's named after Robert E. Lee. It's not.
not,
And it's so funny. Well, Leesburg's named after Lee. I'm like, no, it isn't. It's
no.
nothing to do with Robert E. Lee. But it's funny how people, how
Well, I
people
thought Fort Warren was named after Gouverneur K. Warren.
well, you're not the smart though. It's a problem.
But so he's born in Leesburg. His son fights for the Confederacy. His daughter marries Jeb Stuart. St. George Cook is like, oh, I'm fighting for the Union. And
Yeah.
then Jeb just like was livid about that. But then I kind of like was thinking about it. I'm like, well, Jeb did not live to see the end of the war. His father-in-law lived until
Yeah.
1895.
Yeah. No, it's something.
It's such an interesting story. And I mean, politics definitely factors into Gaines Mill when you look at someone like Fitzjohn Porter, who is, I think, like, I started to get really interested in him. James asked if it's named after Light Horse Harry Lee.
I don't think it's him. It's that same. It's a Lee family, but it's not him either. It's some. I looked it up for some reason that popped into my head. I wanted to look that up. It's not him. It's a relative of theirs.
Yeah.
Who I assume helped found the town or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty cool.
But like, so Fitzjohn Porter is, so Blackjack Logan doesn't like him.
Yeah.
And was after him ever since Second Manassas. And he finally, Porter finally Oh, David says he's been Elmwood Cemetery, so he's seen St. George Cook's grave. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
So Porter, Blackjack, political general, has it in for him. But then in November of 1862, he is arrested for what Porter is arrested for, I think, for Manassas is what they bring him up on charges for. And
yeah,
he ends up getting just completely like guilty. By January, he's out of the army. And I think the reason they wait until November is because by that point, McClellan is gone, and he and McClellan were very good friends, and McClellan couldn't vouch for him anymore. So Porter is going to fight for, nearly the rest of his life to get his name cleared. And it's like, I think it's John Schofield who finally starts the process of doing that post Civil War,
yeah. He
and
does.
then Johnston kind of reinstates him into the army. Doesn't get back pay for anything though, which is kind of like okay, whatever. But 2 days after John Porter gets reinstated into the army, he retires. And it's really too
Yeah,
bad that the one person I was thinking about was Gouverneur K. Warren.
no, it is.
Is that like, and he didn't get reinstated until after his death, right?
Yeah, he got reinstated. Yeah, but Kuda Warren was just bitter. He at the end of the day,
I don't blame him.
no, he was. Let me see these comments here. 41-33 better score. I forget, Rich. I forget the name of the Super Bowl 39 when the Pats beat the Eagles. There's been so many. I forget the scores. MJ. Yeah, I haven't seen a 2004 Yankees ALCS T-shirt either, MJ. So yeah, you realize how many Red Sox, how many World Series have cost the Yankees? It's funny. She likes to talk about Eli with the Pats. How many World Series has David Ortiz cost the Yankees? It's funny how that works out, but she never mentions that.
I'm just sitting here with my 1940
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird.
being
It's weird how that
happy.
hypocrisy goes. But in any case, but it's funny how it is though. But a lot of these guys, in all seriousness, a lot of these guys they did die bitter because again, when the politics of the war ended, if they weren't on the good side of it, I mean, it's easy why you can see why guys like a Charles Tilden, um, would not write about the war because who
Yeah.
knows what experiences he had. This is a guy who was captured twice. He gets captured
Yep.
at Gettysburg. He escapes Libby prison. He gets caught again at Petersburg and escapes again. So who knows what his mindset is? He
Yep.
probably doesn't want to talk about it. For every guy, for every Abner Small, or for every John Brown Gordon, there's a lot of guys who just they want to put the war behind them. I mean,
Yep.
I don't think for the most part it was a very good experience for a lot of these guys. They just don't want to live
No.
it. Like I said before, my grandfather, when he was alive, he fought at the Battle of the Bulge. He would never talk to me about his World War II
Yep.
experiences. When his buddies came over and drank whiskey and got hammered, they talk about themselves, but he would never talk to me about it. He
Well,
never would because it
it's a
just,
shared experience that nobody else relates to. Like when you've been through something like that, nobody else relates to it. I
yeah,
mean, not the same, but I mean, I have friends that I worked with. We met during the pandemic because we were all thrown together in this like ad hoc group because we all needed
yeah,
to work. So I got kind of shifted over to another department. I had nothing in common with one person, and I've become really good friends with him and his fiance. Like we have not really much in common, but we get
mhm,
together and we can have beers and we like the three of us just sit there and like, talk about life and stuff. And it was like we liken it back to the shared experience of going through the pandemic in that group together. Um,
yeah,
that was, and not the same as war, obviously. I'm not comparing it to that at all, but it's like it's tough to explain it to other people how you and I think that's obviously my grandfather was the same way. I had two grandfathers who were involved in the war. One of them was a grounds crew on a mosquito squadron in the south of
mhm,
England, and he talked to me about it. And I know he didn't really talk to some of my other cousins about it because I'm a lot older than them. But like, and he would get really emotional about it. And I would just sit there and listen to him.
yeah.
My other grandfather, my mom's dad, I never met because he died when my mom was like 13. But he was involved in like the liberation of a concentration camp. Never talked about it. Like
Yeah. I mean, I think
you don't talk about that.
no, I think a lot of these guys, and fortunately, we kind of grew up in an era where we kind of were protected from them. If you grew up, if you were born in the 20s or 30s, I mean, you think the reality, World War II, you've got Korea, you've got
Yeah.
Vietnam, and so we've been kind of insulated. But yeah, it's a fraternity that these dudes don't talk about. So when you look at a guy like a lot of these people, like I mentioned Tilden a while ago, there's a pretty good chance that the reason why that there's not paper is because he just didn't want to talk about it. I mean,
Yeah,
can you imagine the stuff that he saw with the 16th Maine that day at Gettysburg on the 1st of July, right?
yeah,
Where he's asked to sack 330 men. He creates that salient right there at the Mummersburg Road point,
yeah.
right there. And basically 30 something get out of there and they end up going back to the Cemetery Hill. Most of them get captured where the Pizza Hut is,
Yeah.
admittedly, right?
Why is there always
But
a Pizza Hut?
I don't know. But these experiences that a lot of them probably blocked out. And
Yeah.
PTSD was not known at that point. It was just starting to come out
But
now. Allegedly, Rufus Dawes was the first documented case of PTSD,
yeah.
but by no means was he the first one who had it. Yeah,
No, no.
right.
And I mean, there's some things too that like, some of these guys I think wrote also to get it out on paper, to get it out of their systems. You read some of the memoirs and some of them are very descriptive in their details. Like, yes, I'm going to bring up Howard again, but he talks specifically after Pickett's Mill about um
Right.
armless, legless, and eyeless men walking around, men with their eyes shut. Like he's right, like I'm like,
Yeah.
this is graphic.
Well,
And he
why
also,
do you think Ella Spear was so upset about Chamberlain's writings?
yeah,
And you talk about dudes who talked a lot about the glory of war. Chamberlain was one. Lou
yeah,
Wallace was another one.
yeah,
And you can see why they'd be polarizing in a lot of respect because people didn't remember Ella Spear, guys like Melcher, they didn't remember glory of war. They
hmm,
remember death and misery and pain. That's what they remember.
yeah,
So to see a guy getting famous talk about the chivalry and glory, yeah, of course it pissed people off. But that's just human nature.
yeah. Well,
Doesn't
I think,
doesn't doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means that there's if you talk about certain aspects of it that you don't really appreciate. If you want to put the war behind you, you just want to. I don't want to think about this anymore. You got a guy consistently talking about everything that
yeah,
happened
and it's
at
glorious.
Shiloh or Little Round Top or things like that. I mean, again, but you can't at the same time you can't forget about it either.
No,
The one thing and MJ's on here, and I don't know if you know this, Mary, but she's a big Hancock fan. But one of the things about Hancock that I always respected was the fact that he showed up at the first Minnesota
yeah, I
reunion.
love that
Now
story.
he's a guy who said to Colville famously, "These all the men you have, take the colors," as he went to go challenge the great Cadmus Wilcox over there by the Trossel barn, right across that field, and he got a lot of them got slaughtered.
Yep,
It was one of the highest casualty regiments in the entire war, and he showed up at the reunion, and he got up there and he spoke at it, and he says, "Yeah, I know I got your regiment slaughtered, but I had to do it, and I would do it again."
yep,
And he kind of gained a lot of respect by the survivors. But that's what this was, right?
yeah. And I do wonder too, some of them writing like so. I'm not sure. I have to look it up, but I'm not sure when Howard wrote his. I think he wrote his memoirs. I think it was after his son was killed. His son was killed in a war. And I do sometimes wonder if the way he talks, like if he decided, all right, you know what? I'm just gonna like put it out in graphic details what I witnessed, and maybe, just maybe, there won't be glory. But I do, maybe people won't see it as a glorious cause, but like he and his wife really struggled with
Yeah.
that. Obviously I think it was their firstborn is killed in a war. And if Howard's writing his memoirs after that, it really makes sense that he does mention like the Gettysburg chapter specifically. He goes on for a couple paragraphs about how there are people glorifying the war, and I think he's kind of taken a, maybe not a shot, but he's calling out Chamberlain there, he's calling out Wallace to say like, this is not glorious. We can't have our young men wanting to go off and fight in a war because it's not glorious. The Atlanta campaign specifically, his chapters on that, he gets really graphic with some of the details, like the eyeless men after Pickett's Mill. He refers to
Mhm.
Pickett's Mill as being a nightmare. He said that he's like, I thought it was bad in Antietam and Gettysburg what I saw there, and he's like, but this is he said nothing topped Pickett's Mill for him with what he saw there. And I do wonder if he's writing that way to kind of discourage somebody from thinking, oh, I'm going to go off and fight and see and see see the world doing this. Because I think a few of his kids were in the army. His one, I know Chancey was. There's a picture of him, Chancey, and Chancey's sons
Mhm.
in their army uniforms. And I don't, I do wonder looking at that picture, like, how did Howard feel about that? Like, was he thinking like, I wish my kids were choosing a different profession at this point?
Mhm.
James said Chamberlain and Wallace were artsy people. Did that play a part? I think it did.
Yeah, of
They
course
were
it was. Of course it
very,
was.
very good
The
writers.
the thing you got to remember about Wallace and Chamberlain is they were brilliant writers. You know who else was a
Mhm.
brilliant writer too was Dan Sickles, by the way. If you
Yeah.
read his stuff, the dude's he's a different level. It makes your brain hurt. But Wallace, obviously, he wrote Ben Hur, but he also just took to writing. Chamberlain, great writer, great speaker. He had a stutter he had to overcome
Yeah.
growing up. Um, but they could write, and they Lou Wallace especially, he got into war because he saw it as chivalrous. He saw it pretty.
Yeah.
He's that kid walking around with the wooden sword. Remember,
Yeah.
uh, watching his father train the troops. With the corn stalks, they couldn't have muskets, and he fell in love with the idea of glory and war,
Yeah.
and guys like that was a common thing in a lot of cases. Again, not Rufus Dawes, Lou Wallace and Joshua Chamberlain were not we're not private soldiers being conscripted in from the south or the north either here. I
Yeah.
mean, they were a higher level. I mean, right at the beginning, so they could probably get away with it. I don't know how many Abner Smalls or Charles Wainwrights of the world talk about chivalry and war, because especially Small, who kind of came up through the ranks in a lot of these guys.
Yeah.
John Brown Gordon never talked about chivalry of war. He
No.
came up through the 6th Alabama, and he was someone who did his saw it as a job. But when he was done, he used the war to help promote his politics
Yeah.
and what he wanted to get home rule back in Georgia again. But again, for the most part, there aren't a lot of really embellishing writers, and those two are the two primary ones.
Yeah.
Guys like
And
Ambrose Bierce wrote about the horrors of war,
that's what James just
right?
mentioned is Bierce, and he wrote about that. So he's on the Atlanta campaign. He's seeing this, he's at Pickett's Mill with Howard, and he wrote, The Crime of Pickett's Mill, which you can, if you just Google The Crime of Pickett's Mill, it's available to read online. But he based a lot of his horror writings off what he witnessed in the war. And I think that was kind of his way of dealing with it, was writing it down and getting it out. And I mean, of course, like, I know some people call him bitter Bierce, but you know what? I probably would have been too if I had been in his place, especially at Pickett's Mill, because Pickett's Mill and Kennesaw are two battles in that Atlanta campaign that you go visit them and you're like, like, why did this even happen? Like, why? I mean, Pickett's Mill, I guess it's like they didn't know the terrain and stuff, but Kennesaw, like, I was looking at those pictures we took of the of where the Confederates were, the three levels of breastworks, and I'm like, that Union guy that made it through all three of those, I don't know how he did that.
No, that's a Rambo type guy. That guy was.
Like that guy must have just like,
Well, I mean, anybody who's we a lot of people here, I think, and myself included, tend to focus on the East because that's where we grew up, and that's just the way it is. But where the rubber hits the road is these Western battlefields. And if you go to Kennesaw Mountain and you walk Cheatham Hill, and you go back where those Illinois guys fought, and you can see the tunnel they dug, and you get behind the Confederate breastworks, where McCook's guys, where he stood
yeah,
on the wall and that whole thing, and you get behind that, yeah, you'll see you usually see breastworks. You'll see breastworks if you see it, wherever. The Confederates had 3 levels.
yeah,
That's how. I mean, screw that. And if you go down there and you walk behind them, you'll see a lone Union unknown grave, which is marked by a wooden fence, and it's a
yeah,
gravestone, and that's where he fell, and that's like where he was behind the third breastwork. To be that guy to get there, um, whoever the hell he is deserves way more accolades than a random grave in the middle of the woods, because that's to get to that
yeah,
point, you've got to be a superhero level of soldier.
yeah,
Just forget even getting there, keep going. To walk up
yeah.
that hill, to get through that, to get past the breastworks, to get past that first set, the second set, and the third set. Yeah, the hell with that. That's a different thing.
Like, and
That's
they don't
crazy.
know even what regiment he was from or anything like that. Like they know nothing about this guy at all.
No, he just died as an unknown. They found the graves and they found him late, and they said, you know what, we're just going to leave him here because this is
Yeah.
likely where he fell. They buried him where he fell, and considering where he was, I mean, yeah, it's an unbelievable thing. It really
No,
is.
they, and I mean, I don't know if it's because I'm like, obviously like Canadian, studying the Civil War growing up in Canada, so I didn't really have those geographic, I mean, um, so I mean, the first battlefield I went to when I was like 10 was Gettysburg, because it was like, I don't know, obviously everybody goes to Gettysburg quite a bit. But then like the history trip that I went on in grade 11 was, my school had three history trips and they rotated. So one was Boston, one was Gettysburg, one was New York. So I went on the one, or Washington, and you got to go to Gettysburg. So I obviously went on that one. That was my second trip to Gettysburg. But I always kind of, and then I started gravitating more towards the Western theater. But just studying like, the Atlanta campaign, which the 160th and the 160th of the March to the Sea is coming up, and we're going to do some episodes about that coming up. But like, it's so like, I mean, the terrain is so different, even the politics are different. You have like more, I don't know, like the cast of characters in the Eastern Theater is really, really interesting. But you have this equally interesting cast of characters in the Western Theater that doesn't get talked about as much. You have like, Earl Van Dorn, you have like Blackjack Logan goes out there. You have, and I don't like this guy, but Jefferson C. Davis is another kind of one that is, why is he even fighting? The guy should be in jail. Kind of thing, because he shoots Bull
Well,
Nelson. And you have, Sherman out there who's very much like, he's not into the politics, but he is. But you also have men going out there post Gettysburg, specifically people from, men from the 11th and 12th Corps, including Slocum and including Howard, who Howard especially, he does so well out there. And I do sometimes think it's because he's away from the politics of the Army of the Potomac.
mhm.
He's out there and he's able to kind of do his thing. And kind of also, he's one of these guys that, you look at some of these earlier battles and how they learn and how they recognize, like, I'm in a similar situation to what I was before. I'm going to do this differently. And a lot of them were able to do that. And he does really well out there. And nobody studies that aspect of his career at all. But then also you have the March to the Sea, which is like, Sherman started that with the Meridian campaign to see if it would work. And then he has to go pitch it to Grant and say, I want to make it even bigger.
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah. Well, we should probably talk about Gaines Mill. What do you think?
Well, we have been, but it's just, this is the comments are,
No, I know. I'm just teasing.
no, that's
But
actually, Frank asked, are they doing a commemoration of the 160th to March to the Sea in Georgia? LOL.
yeah, well, I don't think that's going to happen.
They're gonna have
But
a
yeah,
bunch of bonfires.
no, that would be fun. But I mean, I think the thing about it though is I think people don't. I think. I mean, I mean, people are aware of this battle. But it's funny. I think when for some reason when you think of the 7 days thing, I think a lot of people. I don't know why. I think a lot of people fall on Malvern Hill versus
Yeah.
Gaines Mill for whatever reason. Um, and I mean, Lee's 30,000 man charge on Turkey Hill
Yeah.
was the largest charge in the war,
Yeah.
bigger than Pickett's charge, Franklin, Spotsy, all of them. And what you saw with Pickett was a dry run for Pickett's charge.
Yeah.
And we talked in the episode about it was how the impact was. Longstreet sent basically his division. He said Pickett's guys in. And he also later would send in John Bell Hood, as well
Yeah.
as Evander Law against this fortified position across this open field, and he saw them all get slaughtered. And there's no way in the world that this was not in his head a year later at Gettysburg. It had to have been.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
When he's asked again to send Pickett's men across an open field towards an entrenched Union position, and Pickett's charge was a drop in the bucket compared to Gaines Mill as far as numbers go. You're talking 60,000 guys for this. It wasn't 12,000 Confederate dudes, but basically, when you think about how mind and memory work, if you're Longstreet and you're sitting back a year later saying, we did this last year and we got slaughtered. And the only reason why it did finally burst through was because we had 30,000 guys. So when he says no 1,000 men could ever take this position, he has to be thinking of Gaines Mill. He has to be.
That's what I was thinking too. And that's where this whole like thing with you can't look at these battles in a vacuum. They're saying some of these things for a reason. And I think, yes, Longstreet probably is saying that. The other thing that, I took away too from Gaines Mill is like John Bell Hood here is like, this is John Bell Hood. This is who he was. This is him riding out with his men, which is in a way kind of reckless. But this is John Bell Hood at his top here, you know. I think if he had not, then this was the episode that really got me thinking, had he not been wounded, would he maybe have been more fit for command in 1864, when he takes over during the Atlanta campaign just before the Battle of Peachtree Creek? That really got me thinking about this. And yes, like, we have our fun with John Bell Hood on this podcast. Like I still think he was the worst thing ever to happen to the Army of Tennessee with that command. But John Bell Hood, 1862 at this time, he's in his prime.
No, this is the prime Colby of his career.
Yep.
It is. I mean, he was. I mean, he you're charging across that field. You're telling your men, do not load, fix bayonets, run full speed, do not stop and fire, keep going. Meanwhile, you've got Tidball's artillery pounding the Confederates, ripping holes in the lines, and he's still going. And where's Hood? He's in front of his men. He's running with his men behind him. He's the first in line. He's the vanguard. He's a point of the spear.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Longstreet and Vanderlaw are running too, but they're in the back because they can't keep up.
Yeah.
Right. But that's who Hood was. And that's why when you think about how significant his injury was, the Bushman farm at Gettysburg, Evander Law, who eventually would take command of that situation, he was not John Bell Hood. Hood was a different breed, but the wounding slowed him down, and that's what happens. But if you want to look at peak Hood, look at Gaines Mill, because he was great. Because he's and you had a lot of guys like Maxcy Gregg, who were really good. Richard Ewell. You had D.H. Hill, who doesn't get credit for a lot of this too. He's on the Confederate left, hitting that swampy ground, walking through waist-high swamp, getting picked off by Berdan sharpshooters, getting picked off by Sykes's U.S. regulars, the 5th and 10th New York from Gouverneur K. Warren. That's who he's going up against. So when you look at a complete all-in effort by Lee, and this is his first victory as a Confederate general, was Gaines Mill. And I think what happened was Lee got the mentality was, if I throw everything at the kitchen sink, I'm going to beat them. And I think that was his mentality because of Gaines Mill that came to haunt him later, especially at Gettysburg.
Yeah. And I think, too, like for me studying this, like I said, the one that stood out for me, not just being Lee's first victory, which has got to be like, wow, I did this kind of thing, but also just like you said, this is Hood at his best. Who could Hood have been had he not been unfortunately wounded? But I think it was his wounding at Chickamauga that was way more detrimental to him than the one at Gettysburg. Because if you look at Hood at Chickamauga, he is still kind of the Hood from 1862. He's, I think, a little bit slower, but when you look at Longstreet's breakthrough at Chickamauga, who's out in front? It's John Bell Hood.
Yeah, well, right, but I think Hood maintained that aggressiveness. That's why Jefferson Davis loved him in Atlanta. Was he wanted an aggressive guy? He was aggressive. He was that NFL coach who would spread the receivers wide open, up by 30, didn't matter. You do what you do. That's who he was. But when you look at Gaines, you look at the 7 days, he doesn't get the credit that he really deserves.
No.
And the other thing we got to talk about is the other edge of the coin with this too, is history is very hard on Stonewall for the 7 days.
Yeah.
And that comes from Mechanicsville, which was June 26th, and then June 27th, this battle, the Battle of Gaines Mill. And did he have good days? No, he got lost in the woods both days, kind of like the way Wallace did at Shiloh. Yeah. But the problem was, he's going on, especially this one, especially Gaines Mill, when Lee's under the impression after Mechanicsville that Porter is moving east to protect White House Landing, the supply line. Instead, he moves south. Lee bases his entire battle plan on the fact that he thinks where Porter is going to be. And he's wrong.
Yeah.
He has the wrong location. Those aren't the droids he was looking for, Mary.
Yeah.
And so now he sends Jackson and DH Hill and AP Hill on a flanking maneuver to go ahead towards heading towards Old Cold Harbor when Porter is in a different location. And that's the problem. And Jackson gets hit a lot because he got lost, but he's going on bad orders and bad
Yep.
maps. They didn't know Bosun's Creek even existed on their map.
No, it wasn't on. And how many times does that happen in the Civil War? Like you say it on here all the time, terrain, weather, communication will get you. And this is the thing where it's like, it's the terrain not being shown on the map. This is kind of like what happens to Sherman at Chickasaw. He doesn't understand the terrain that he's going up again, but Lee is completely missing, an area on the map. And the other reason too, and this is like when I read this, I kind of was like, okay, this is why. So Stephen Sears is the one that blames Jackson in one of his books.
Well, you know why? It's because
of EP.
Well, right, but there, if you study the war and and I know a lot of people here do, if you study the war in the Confederacy in the East, it's all to really make sure that no matter what happens, it doesn't attack Lee.
Yeah.
Right. So we saw that a lot with Jeb Stuart with the whole Gettysburg campaign. It's going to blame Jeb, Charles Marshall, those guys, Venable, all these dudes, Walter Taylor. They're all going to blame anybody else. This is a situation. And listen, you can't really even blame Lee because based on all military logic, why the hell would George McClellan retreat south of the Chickahominy with that many men when he should have moved north to protect his supply line and continue to push towards Richmond? So what McClellan did is he pulled a rope-a-dope on him, went south of the Chickahominy, and it forced Lee to attack a position that didn't exist. Jackson's following orders. Lee had a game plan that was wrong, but it was wrong because of what McClellan did. I'm not going to praise McClellan for this because what he did didn't really make sense, but he stumbled onto it. For whatever inexplicable mind-numbing decision, he changed his headquarters from White House Landing to Harrison's Landing on the James River, and Lee never expected it.
No.
And so he makes his plan to attack him on a place he wasn't there. So he sends Jackson on this fun run to go find him.
Yeah.
And when he gets there, he's not there anymore.
Yeah. And the reason that Lee even has that intel that McClellan has his supply line at White House Landing is because of Jeb Stuart's ride around McClellan.
Right.
And this is where we talked about this in the episode, Jeb Stuart's ride around McClellan is where Lee is starting to get a lot of this intel, and you start to see this kind of like, oh, I think I can do this now. But then McClellan completely shifts and changes it. Cisco mentioned Sears strikes again. Yes, I'm not trying to I respect Sears. I enjoy reading his books. There's stuff I don't agree with though.
Well, no, but the thing about this is you can make a real legitimate parallel, and this is not a hyperbole, right?
Yeah.
That Gaines Mill is Shiloh again, and Lee is Grant, and Jackson is Wallace. It's the same exact thing.
Yeah,
it really is.
Yeah.
But what happens? Who gets blamed? Wallace and Jackson.
Wallace. Yep.
Grant doesn't, even though he gave Jackson gives his orders later, and he screws us up to a guy named Robert Dabney, who's his chief of staff. And doesn't write them down. Well, he does, but what happens is he ends up giving Dabney's sick. Who knows what the hell he has, but he's not feeling well. So he's in bed, he's sleeping, right? So Jackson gives his verbal orders regarding John Harmon, who goes to guys like William H.C. Whiting, for example, right? And he basically says, here's what I think Jackson wants, but I don't really know. He gave it to me verbally, and it screws him up completely. So they end up waiting an additional hour after the hour and a half it takes for him to get from Old Cold Harbor back down towards the Gaines Mill area. So the whole thing is a communication, cluster from beginning to end. But the thing about it, though, it's not Lee's fault for having a bad plan, because his plan was based on where he assumed he would be. But it wasn't Jackson's fault either because he's following the game plan.
Yeah.
Really, it's McClellan who it's kind of Dan Sickles it. He moves forward to a place no one expected him to be and unwittingly overturns the whole apple cart.
Yeah.
So you can say Sickles' move to the Peach Orchard is a smaller version of McClellan's move to Harrison Landing,
Yeah.
which affected the entire 7 days campaign. That's what's cool about this. You can make those parallels.
Yeah.
And
No,
it's not inaccurate. It really is.
no, and that's what I love about studying this is you can like say like, well, look at what happened here. It's very similar to this, and then you can look at the situations and how they dealt with them. Frank wants to know what's a recommended good book for the overall study of the 7 days.
The best book, I think, is not even about the 7 days. It's a book by a guy named S.C. Wynn. His name. It's called Rebel Yell. It's a book about Stonewall Jackson, and it goes into great detail of the 7 days campaign. It's geared towards Stonewall, but he tells the whole background
Yep.
of the actual battle of those campaigns. I would definitely suggest that. It's Rebel Yell. It's right here. It's called S.C. Gwynn is the writer. On that, it's a great book on Jackson, but it's a great book of the 7 days. It's probably the best book because it gives a really detailed description of the politics and the miscommunication. I mean, the book
Yeah.
is a Jackson ball wash. It is. I'm not going to lie to you, it is. But what it is though, it does explain the miscommunications that went in. It talks about
Yeah.
Lou Armistead and Malvern Hill, the popular general. It talks about that. But it gives a different perspective of the actual battle because it talks about what went wrong. The 7 days ended up being a pretty good thing, obviously, for Lee. Malvern Hill, not so much. Beaverton, Mechanicsville, not so much. But Gaines Mill was, but it was extremely costly, right?
Yeah, and people in
But
time, even by the time he got to White House Landing, that's not a supply base anymore. So he doesn't have what he's looking for. Cisco mentions To the Gates of Richmond by Sears, which
no,
yeah,
so Gates of
that
Richmond's
one
pretty
too.
good. That's a
Yeah.
good one too. But again, it's very that book is very pro Lee, and it's more. I gave the orders. I don't know what happened. Jackson was late. It's a lot of that.
Sears
Um,
does his whole, I like, I'm, I'll just say this diplomatically because I do recommend Sears books to people because they are great to study for the Civil War. But he has his opinion and he's like, what can I find to back this up? Kind of thing as anybody does, right? But he uses a lot of E.P. Alexander in his telling of Jackson at Gaines Mill.
mhm.
And I went kind of ahead and also behind what EP has to say about Gaines Mill, and that man does not like Jackson. He does not like the fact that he will not battle on Sunday. He just like he he hates that man. And it's actually kind of funny.
Well,
You know,
EP is a big Longstreet guy.
oh,
Okay, and there's no
yep,
question. Now, I will say this: his recollections of fighting for the Confederacy by E.P. Alexander is the best book,
it's
in
really
my
good.
in my opinion, on talking about the second day at Gettysburg, especially the Peach Orchard. Um, because he's very very vivid, but he's very pro Longstreet. So you
Yep,
read that, and he's more on the Longstreet side than the Lee side. But
yep.
the more you read, if you read a lot of these different books, you're going to get different perspectives. But that's why you read. Sears' book is good, but it's very pro Lee.
Yep.
The Rebel Yell is very pro Jackson, but it does focus on the miscommunication and the orders. But the thing about it though is usually when there's miscommunication of orders, it tends to fall on the big man, on Robert E. Lee.
Yep.
But that's what we were saying a few minutes ago, is you really can't blame him for that, because by all accounts, by every stretch of the imagination, Porter should have been east of Beaver Creek. He
Yeah.
should have been, because that's where the logic was. And of
Hmm.
course, you're gonna fight and defend, and that's where you're gonna go. But for whatever reason, McClellan chose to forego White House Landing, move to Harris's Landing, and attack Richmond from there, which completely rope-a-doped Lee.
Yeah.
It did. Um, and so, the Sickles comparison is actually a pretty good one. It really
That
did.
is really good. I
You
like
know,
that. And I love like to do that with the Civil War is to compare because I think it helps you understand kind of what's going like, kind of the similar mindset some of them had, but to show like there's similar things happening all over the place and
but
similar
but
outcomes
you know
as
why
well.
McClellan why McClellan moved from White House Landing to Harrison Landing was because the specter of Stonewall Jackson.
And also
So
because and also like Jeb
because
was
of Jeb's
causing a bunch
run,
of shit
right?
too.
But he knew. Look, I won Beaver Creek, Mechanicsville,
Hmm.
with my Fifth Corps with Porter, and
Yeah.
by all accounts, I got lucky because D.H. Hill and A.P. Hill fought me mano a mano, and if Jackson didn't get lost, was slow on the way from the valley, and that's where he was, right? I would have got astroglided, and he knew that. So he says, well, if Lee's going to run the same game plan again, Jackson's here now because I'm getting
Yeah.
reports of guys, Ewell's being seen, people like
Mhm.
that. I can't have one 35,000 man corps up against a gigantic Confederate army. I need to pull the hell out.
Yeah.
So the specter of Jackson's why he left, and the fact that he was left, why he was late again, is why Porter survived as long as he did and bought him enough time to get over the Chickahominy.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it's one of those things there, which is kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
But that was all of 1862, though. Because what?
1862 is they're stumbling around. And I saw like something like so we do still maintain our Twitter X, whatever the hell it's called now, podcast account.
Yeah,
We
we
don't have
dumped our personal ones
personal ones
because of the
yes,
crazies.
because of the crazies. But like there was somebody on there that, and I mean the person knows their Civil War stuff, but they said like I I wish that Grant had been brought in to lead the AOP in 1862. And I was kind of like, do you though? Like Grant 1862
Well, he
is
wasn't granted
not Grant
1862.
18, and that's the thing is people are like, if Grant had been brought in sooner, it's like, no, that's because if you're talking about bringing Grant in when McClellan is in charge in 1862, you also have to bring in Grant of 1862, who was not Grant in 1864. It's so different.
Well, when you look at it's funny. You and I were talking about this the other night.
Oh, Leonard's on from Vicksburg.
Leonard, the trivia champ. We haven't seen Leonard in a while.
I
He must
don't.
be all excited with the Vicksburg camp going on.
Oh, the
Vicksburg
gallant
camp going.
Bowen.
The gallant Bowen, right?
We
John
still have
Bowen.
to do an episode on Bowen.
Oh, can you imagine him? Have to hose him down for that one.
Poor Leonard.
Oh, Leonard's the man. He's a great dude.
Yeah,
but we were talking the other night about this whole thing, about how every year, right? It was kind of like 1861 was kind of the foundational year,
Yep.
right? 1862 was the whole, wow, we have more power than we think we do. This is going to be bad.
Yep.
63 was kind of the maneuver year, right? And then 64 was the bloodletting year. That was the grand finale, right?
Yep.
But 62 is fascinating because you realize you've got Shiloh and April right off the bat when you realize this is going to be pretty bad. And then you have that's going on in the West. Out in the East, you've got McClellan doing his thing. Now, 62 is fascinating because when you take a peek at this, you've got the Peninsula Campaign, you have the 7 Days Campaign. It dovetails right into Second Manassas, which leads to John Pope getting pantsed again. McClellan's back, the search for Curly's Gold 2.0, he's back. And now you're going into the South Mountain, Loss Order 191, Antietam, Emancipation Proclamation. Now you're going that, and then now it's back to Fredericksburg. So you can see how it just seems to build, right?
Yeah.
And so the armies get bigger and the battles get more vicious. And Lincoln has more and more personal issues going on with Willie and everything else that are going on with him. And it kind of leads to 63. But the thing about it, though, is where people go wrong with this is they tunnel vision on a specific battle. Gettysburg, Antietam, Vicksburg, Chickamauga, all that stuff. But you have to really look at how the evolution goes of each army. You see the evolution of the Union cavalry in the Gettysburg campaign, Aldie, Middleburg, Upperville, the whole thing all the way through. You see you see kind of the degeneration of the Confederate artillery when James Pendleton finds God and gets in his head and screws that whole thing up, right? Well, he does, right? So you can see how it all kind of goes. And then by 64, you've got this Union monster all moving in the West and the East, and this basically this counterclockwise type of motion, which leads to the March to the Sea, which leads to Overland Campaign.
Yeah.
And so if you take a step back and look at the big picture, it's fascinating. It just is. But a battle like Gaines' Mill, and you got to realize Gaines' Mill is a monster of a battle. This is not a bump in the road type of battle. This is not a Chantilly. This is not one of those deals. this, just a small battle. Gaines Mill should be a big boy top 10 battle when it comes to Civil War history, because you learn a lot about Lee's reputation with being aggressive. Jackson, the fact that
Yep.
this is where Lee first gives his macro orders, where I want you to do this. I'm not going to tell you how. But
Yep.
Jackson learns I've got to give micro orders to my guys, which is
Yeah.
going to be Ewell. It's going to be A.P. Hill. It's going to be guys like that. And you can see how they learn as they go with this.
Mhm.
Gaines Mill is a conduit. It's a lymph node point in the American
Yep.
Civil War, because everything changes after Gaines Mill. It does. And it should be looked at as a much bigger battle. And it's just
Agreed.
not. It's
No.
not.
So our friend Bjorn is on here from Abraham Lincoln Bookshop, and he says, "What are we talking about today? Civil War."
Yeah, Bjorn, we're talking
him,
about we're talking about the Cubs, Bjorn. Talking about what's going on with the Chicago Cubs in the north. The North Siders seem to have hit a brick wall all of a sudden. No.
I asked him if he can recommend any books on the 7 days. Said we need more. Stephen Sears is where to get started. He's a good writer. I definitely agree with that. Steve Sears is a great writer.
Yeah, he is. We have our issues with Sears. That question that came up, I suggested S.E. Gwynn's Rebel Yell, which is really a book about Stonewall Jackson, but it gives a lot of the communication, the politics to Jackson, which affected the 7 Days campaign, which talked about Mechanicsville, which talked about this one about.
I'd like to know if there's a biography about Fitz-John Porter.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Bjorn Cubs are good at hitting brick walls.
That's true. It's probably
as a Guardians fan, I'm kind of glad to see that.
Anyway, thoughts and prayers, Guardians, by the way. But anyway,
Leonard says he's still waiting on that Bowen episode.
Yeah, no, we got many miles to go there.
We can call it the Gallant Bowen.
Be patient, Grasshopper. We'll get there. I promise we will. But no, but there's a lot of different things. A lot of times, Rebel Yell is great because, like we said before, it's not about this battle, but it spends a lot of time talking about it. And like we said before, it is a reach around for Stonewall. It is, okay, but what it does do is like I said before, it talks about the communication between Lee and Jackson.
Yep.
And what it does, though, it really puts a spotlight on Lee's management style, which we saw later on, especially Gettysburg with guys like Ewell, right? And it talks about how I don't want to say laissez-faire, but he was more, like we said before a million times, I'm not going to tell you how to take this hill, but I want you to take that hill. Versus Jackson would give very specific orders. And I think a lot of that was because of Mechanicsville and Gaines Mill, because he saw how loose orders got him in trouble. So he made sure from that point on that his orders to his subordinates were very, very specific. We saw the thing with William H.C. Whiting, right? With Dabney. With that whole thing with John Harmon. He knew the importance of specific orders. And from Gaines Mill on, everything Jackson did was very specific. That's why Gaines Mill's important. It really, really is.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, like, when it comes to either Jackson or Lee, I would rather have Jackson writing me orders, because I'm the type of person that if you don't tell me exactly what I need to do, I'm going to come back and be like, you need to clarify this. And I know I've had some supervisors that has annoyed, because I'm not going to I can't interpret vague booking very well. I need it specifically what I need to do. Otherwise, I'm going to be like, well, maybe they want me to do it this way. And I asked Bjorn if there's any bios on Fitz-John Porter, and he said William Marvel's Radical Sacrifice is about him, and he's very sympathetic to Porter. I think Porter is this has sparked my interest in him. He's such a
Well, you look at Fitz-John Porter.
Under the radar.
He does a great job with the Fifth Corps. He was in an impossible situation. He held on as long as he did. He won Mechanicsville. He did, and you can say because the best player wasn't on the field, and that's fair. But he does a great job at Gaines Mill. He sets up a Gibraltar line. If you've been at Gaines Mill and you see his battle line, good luck beating that, because that was a fantastic one.
Yeah.
You've got artillery, you've got cavalry, you've got everything, and you've got the men. You got Slocum. His men are going to show up. You're going to have a couple of Edward Sumner's Second Corps brigades are going to come. But again, the numbers do tell the story, which a lot of these battles, he ultimately falls back. But the problem is the politics. From there, we get to Second Manassas. And he has a hate-on with John Pope. He just does.
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell the deal was. Some people like Lionel Richie, some people don't, Mary. That's the situation, right? So what happens is he ends up getting court-martialed. And that haunts him for the rest of his damn life. And he fights that forever. But it's tough to look at a Fitz-John Porter in a negative way when you realize what he did here.
Yeah.
But you can see the politics. The politics runs everything. And
it goes back to blackjack. And I just want to say quickly, so I put a link in there for Abraham Lincoln Bookshop, which is where Bjorn works there. And I was just looking at their homepage. One of their new acquisitions is a Gutzon Borglum Abraham Lincoln bronze bust.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And they do really awesome Facebook Lives with new Civil War books that have come out with the authors. And they're really good. If you can catch them, they're really awesome.
No,
Leonard, who's better? Who's the better Civil War Porter, Fitz-John or David Dixon?
Well, they're related. They're related. And he's also
related. Farragut. Farragut's technically
he's related to Fitz. Yeah. So he was kind of the army guy who didn't like the boats. Everybody else was in the Navy. But I mean, the thing about it though is, yes, he retreats from Longstreet at Second Manassas, but again, he's got the memory of Gaines' Mill burning in his ear of what Longstreet can do. And Porter, Pope, who admittedly says that he's used to seeing the backs of Confederates, not the fronts, because he's an arrogant bastard. That's how he is. And he needs someone to blame for his loss of Second Manassas, which was just a beatdown. It just was. So, and then you get that stigma for the rest of the way. Fitz-John Porter, ultimately, fun fact, Mary, he was one of the people at the Lincoln conspiracy trial.
Yeah.
He was there as well. He led he was one of the people who helped lead the court against the conspirators, which we're going to talk about next week, by the way.
We are. That is our next episode, is about the conspirators in a couple of weeks. Bjorn mentions one of the best books about Peninsula is not military at all. Check out Glenn Brasher's The Peninsula Campaign and the Necessity of Emancipation. It won't answer your questions about Jackson, though, but that's another one to check out about it. So this is why we love it when Bjorn comes on here, because we're like, we need book recommendations for our episodes.
No, Bjorn.
Get them from Abraham Lincoln Bookshop or just an independent bookstore. Just support those.
No, Abraham Lincoln Bookshop in Chicago, that Bjorn is the coolest bookshop I've ever been in. And we've talked about this a million times. You go in there, go see Bjorn. It's basically a museum. It's basically a consignment shop with really cool books, is what it really, really is. And go check that stuff out. He's one of our sponsors who helps do our trivia. So all the books, if you've ever won a book, I'm looking at you, Leonard, freaking cheater. But Leonard
doesn't need books. He just knows it all.
So every book that Leonard has won has been courtesy of Bjorn at the Lincoln Bookshop. So it's pretty cool. It's funny how that is,
Yeah. Bjorn mentions Porter was a super political general. It's just that he liked to claim that he wasn't political.
Well, he's a political.
Why Blackjack didn't like him.
No, he did graduate 5th in his class of 1845 at West Point, right? So he definitely had the cachet. A Portsmouth, New Hampshire guy who's from the town my mother lives in, Mary, of all places. So. Yeah. Infamous. He's got a statue up there too.
Yeah, we have to go up there. I know you don't want to, but go up and see that statue.
Yeah, it's pretty. We're going to be scheduling. We're going to be scheduling another book thing pretty soon. But but definitely we'll do trivia pretty soon. We got a whole box of books that he sent us and some other stuff.
Yeah, we do have to do trivia as well. We've life is very chaotic right now, so. We're very happy to get on here and talk to everybody.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I just want to mention too that, and we haven't set this in stone yet, but probably we're going to be doing some episodes coming up about the Atlanta campaign because it is the 160th, and we're probably going to be doing Reams Station as well.
Yeah, well, that's one from the Petersburg campaign that's interesting. Though it wasn't Hancock's better deal, but he gets blasted by A.P. Hill in that one. But we'll talk about that. Again, that's not really his fault either. I mean, but that's the thing about this stuff is you can tend to get labeled. Jackson, and I mean, we've had fun with Stonewall with this.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, yes, did he have a good 7 days campaign? No, of course he did. But it wasn't all his fault either. So don't save your letters, Stonewall people. Don't
We're
send
not
us your
hating
email.
on the
Don't
old
send us your hate.
Stonewall.
We're not ripping on Stonewall here. But again, this is part of that nascent stage of Lee's tenure where he's trying to figure some stuff out. He knows who he has. He knows what he doesn't have. But again, you have a lot of his subordinates trying to figure out Robert Lee's management style. And that's the problem. And like I said, McClellan kind of inadvertently throws a monkey wrench into the plans by moving Salt to Harrison Stations, which he didn't expect, you know?
Oh, Leonard said he wants a Birdsey episode.
We've talked about that, haven't we? I thought we
I
have.
think we had, like, we've not done a whole. I wonder if we should do a whole episode on him because that would be actually really, really good to do one on Birdsey.
Yeah.
Because
No,
he's an interesting figure in the Civil War where I go back and forth about how much I mean, I like him, but I go back and forth on how much that like
so
is.
here's a good question for you, Mary, as I can read this. When is the Iron Dice Book Club? Yeah,
I
no
just
kidding.
said we're going to be setting a date for that soon.
Richie, if I had a nickel for every time I've asked her this,
You've
I'd
only
be
asked me
I'd be a
once
million.
recently.
Oh, geez, you talk with forked tongue. You kidding me? We've talked about getting. So Tim Smith is going to come on with us, talk about his fantastic book, to talk about Albert Finney Johnson. But we have to pick a date. So it's going to be happening. It's probably going to be late summer, early fall, realistically speaking.
Yeah.
And that's just because it also affects his availability. We had Tim
We
on
originally
last
had
year.
wanted to do it in June or July, but like we just have to get back to him about a date.
No, we got to pick a date. He's busy. He's in his campaign season. We got a lot of stuff going on here with a lot of stuff that's going on with our little lives. So we have to kind of figure a lot of stuff out. So,
and then
but
Bjorn mentions watch for David Powell's new 3-volume Atlanta. Volume 1 is due next month, so that's something to watch out for too. Is Dave Powell's, and he wrote an excellent 3-volume on Chickamauga. And what was I going to say? A Birdsey episode would be really cool. The other ones that we're looking at are Peachtree Creek as well as Jonesboro.
And also, we're going to be doing Robert Colby's Unholy Traffic too.
Yeah,
who happened to be on Bjorn's live a few weeks ago.
We watched that. That was really
and
good.
We jumped on that.
Unholy Traffic.
And that's a tough one because it talks about the slave trade. But again, it's part of the thing. We got to talk about it. It is what it is, you know. But anyways, so what's coming up for us? We're going to jump up here pretty soon. It's already quarter.
Well, I just mentioned we're probably our next episode is going to be we're going to be recording in Grant Hall on Fort McNair, which is Grant Hall is where the Lincoln conspiracy trial was held. So we're going to be recording with some historians there, including
Michael Kaufman,
Kim Houlihan. And
don't forget Adam Oler.
Adam Oler is going to be on with us too. We're going to be recording with them.
So this is a bucket list thing. So the Lincoln conspiracy trial, we're going to focus on really the 4 who were executed: Atzerodt, Herold, Powell, and Mary Surratt, of course.
Yep.
And we're going to be recording this with Michael Kaufman, who wrote the best book about the assassination, in our opinion, called American Brutus. We're going to be recording from inside the actual courtroom that we got permission to get inside from the U.S. Army. So this is pretty cool. So we're going to be heading down south this next couple of days, and we're going to be in Gettysburg, and we're going to be in Washington next week. But we're going to be doing that. So we're going to record that next Monday, the 8th, right?
Yeah,
a week from Monday.
Monday.
So we're going to be going that. We're going to be getting the Canadian into a military base, which is always fun, like last time.
It's not that bad. The guy was like, "You just need to show me your driver's license," and I'm like,
"We had to go to the Pentagon last time to get Mary's okay to get in the damn building. She's a menace. She's an international menace. But we head to Gettysburg tomorrow. We're going down there tomorrow, so we're going to head down to town tomorrow. We'll be there for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, James just asked if we're headed to Gettysburg. Yes, we are.
Yeah,
we're going like a week early.
No, but it's cool. But to be honest, the Lincoln assassination conspiracy trial was kind of like my entry into Civil War history back in high school. Too. And so being able to, we visited a couple months ago in that courtesy again of people like Adam and people in the U.S. military who helped us get in there. But after we did that, they reached out to us and said, "Hey, we'd love to have you do an episode from the courtroom. Will you be interested?" I'm like, "Hell yeah, I'll be interested." Go, "Well, why don't we? Michael Kaufman will join you if that's okay." I'm like, "Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's good.
I suppose we can let that go," as well as their Ken Holian, who's a military historian, and then Adam's going to join us too. So we're going to be basically doing a 5-person panel talk about the conspiracy trial from
Yeah.
inside the actual courtroom, which is going to be a pants tense situation for someone like me. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this.
And
That'll be our next episode.
that's also how I got into the Civil War via the Lincoln assassination and the trial when I was like 6. Because my dad had bought me, I'm sure many people are familiar with the Time Life series on the Civil War. And the one I picked to read one night, this was before I had a Nintendo and got obsessed with video games, was the one about the Lincoln assassination.
Yeah.
And like Darren said earlier, I got pulled into it by the pictures. I could see these people. I could look at, the pictures of it, and it pulled me in. Like, yes, at the age of 6, and I just became obsessed with it. Like, and it stuck with me for, obviously, I'm in my 40s now, so it's like it's stayed around. And that's why when I was 9, my parents asked me where I want to go on vacation. I'm like, Gettysburg. It was that or Disney. It's like, and I mean, I've been to Disney more than a normal person should. So, James mentions Time Life. Yes, those Time Life books are actually, if you can find them now, get them. They're like a broad level overview. I'm not sure they're 100% accurate, but you know what? That was my gateway drug into this, and I still have the set. It's back in Canada, and I hope it's still back at my dad's place.
Oh yeah.
But it was, and he didn't order me all the books, so I had to figure out which ones I needed, and I managed to find the rest of them one time at a used bookshop in Gettysburg, and I bought the rest of them and I completed the set. Frank says he still has some of those ones.
Oh, we still have them.
Yeah,
I
the
think, I
Time Life,
think,
the time.
I
No,
think
we
that-
don't have the Time Life ones.
Don't
We
we?
don't. No,
I thought
no,
we did.
that's another one that you have. There's some
Okay.
different ones.
Gotcha.
Dior mentions Lincoln's Assassins by James Swanson, and my boss, Dan Weinberg, is a fine and inventive history of trial and execution. Yes, so that's another one right there that Dior mentions.
That's good. And again, if you want to talk, if you're interested in the Lincoln assassination, check out the Lynn Conspirators blog by our friend Dave Taylor.
I will post that.
Dave Taylor. We did an episode with him a couple of weeks ago, and he's probably, I've said this a million times. He's a top 3, top 5 person in the world who, as far as Lincoln assassination goes. He's a good friend of ours, and he's a lot of fun. So
I just posted Lincoln. I know he recently wrote that he has completed. He's still working on the reviews of each episode.
That was fun when we did the Manhunt.
Dave is such a fun guy.
Because what's funny is I've studied the Lincoln conspiracy way more than a normal human would, as did he. So he and I are talking about it. It was kind of like that Spider-Man meme. We're pointing at each other because we picked up the same exact little things that were fun with it. But he's a great dude. But there's a lot of fun stuff we'll do. So anyway, all right. So we'll jump off here pretty soon. So we get ready to go. So next episode we'll be recording from Grant Hall at Fort McNair in Washington D.C. a week from Monday. And we're going to record that, and that'll be a lot of fun. So definitely check that one out. And then we get some other stuff coming down the pike here for that. So hopefully you get out to your battlefields this weekend. Gettysburg 161, Vicksburg 161, Savage Station. There's a lot of them going on right now. Obviously 7 days is still going on. There's a lot of fun stuff you can do. It's kind of like that Japanese animation of Civil War time. Everything's going on.
There's so much going on, like whether it's 1862, 63, or 64, there's so much going on. I just want to say, like Frank said, he lives near Disneyland. He's never been. And I just said, like, just go to Magic Kingdom in Florida.
Yeah, no kidding. But that should be a good time. So all right, so everyone, thanks for joining us. Hopefully, have a good weekend. It's cloudy here. It's gonna be a humid day here, I think, but hopefully it's nice where you are. Get out to your battlefields, go support them. If you're in Gettysburg, a little Round Top is open, so go check a little Round Top up. Stay on the path. Make sure it's good. Don't do anything silly. Don't do anything stupid, Mary. When we get to Gettysburg next week, we'll have a good time with that.
Well, we're gonna be there as of tomorrow.
And if you are in Gettysburg, our friend MJ is doing her live history on the 6th and the 7th. You can go over to
Heritage Park.
6th and 7th at Heritage Park, which is over by Mr. G's Ice Cream, the home of Winsfield Scott Hancock. You can go over there and you can see her do her presentation on Pauline Cushman. I think she's doing a women's panel as well. Go check that out.
I know MJ's doing a talk on Hancock's wounding. Yeah. As well.
Okay.
I think she's doing that on the 7th, on Sunday. So there's lots of stuff happening in Gettysburg next week. I mean, the anniversary is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but I think what Gettysburg does is they kind of set it to the weekend after that. So
Right.
there's more going on next weekend in Gettysburg. But yes, our friend MJ is going to be there with her. She's with the Confederation of Union Veteran or
Yep.
Confederation of Union.
So we'll be seeing her at the mine.
Yep, generals.
If you are in Gettysburg, drop us a line. We have love to get a beer. We're always around, so just
Yep.
hit us up. We'll definitely go catch up as well. All
Yeah,
right, Mary.
thanks for Bjorn for being on here. As always,
Yeah,
he's an awesome sponsor that we have
he
for this
always comes on
podcast.
late. He's kind of like the closer in the
Well, it's
bullpen.
because he's
We
he's
call
an
for him.
hour
He
behind.
always comes. I know it's awesome. No, it's great. He comes in. He
He's
comes
kind of
in.
like he's gonna hate this reference. He's like the Andrew Miller.
Well, I guess he's more of the Martin Rivera if you really think about it than Andrew Miller. But I love my Andrew Miller, but I'm gonna call it the way it is. All right, so off we go, guys. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, and definitely take advantage of the battlefield. Stay cool. Put your sunscreen on, gentlemen. Gold Bond powder is your friend. You know what I'm talking about, and we'll talk to you all soon. Mary, the pleasure was all yours. Listen to the episode, everybody. Gaines Mill. It's an important episode. No one studies.
Yep.
It's one you really, really, really need to understand. If you want to understand the later events, especially Gettysburg, the mindset of guys like Longstreet and Pickett, really get into Gaines Mill. Listen to the episode, read about it, and enjoy it. See you all out there. Have a good time.
Yep. Have a great weekend. Check out
Peace
Abraham Lincoln
out.
Bookshop as well as Lincoln Conspirators blog, and we will see you guys hopefully next weekend.